RuneScape is about to be sold again. But who's the new owner? Well, it could be you. Today we talk about why and what it means for the game's future. But before we talk about the game's future, let's talk about a futuristic game. Mech Arena is both today's sponsor and one of the most refreshing mobile games I've seen in a long time. It's an awesome new third-person shooter where you control your own mech. Unlike other mech games, matches are super high-paced and are usually less than 5 minutes start to finish. But those 5 minutes are action-packed. The maps have been designed for fast action, fast respawns, and constant encounters around every corner, but you'll still have to play smart to win. This month, Mech Arena has a ton of stuff going on, including Easter and Golden Week events where you can unlock new weapons, skins, and more. Mech Arena is free to play and it's available on Android and iOS right now. Use my link below or the QR code on screen right now to get a free starter pack worth $45. It has a mil-spec skin, 500 A coins, and 70,000 credits. You might even catch me online, so add me to your friends list if you want to play some matches together. I'll see you in game. Jagex, as it is right now, is a private company, meaning if you wanted to buy shares of Jagex on a stock exchange, you couldn't. This is only possible with public companies like Microsoft and Apple. But why would I want to buy a share of Jagex, you may be wondering? Well, when you buy a share of a company like Apple, you hopefully make money when the stock price increases, you earn a little bit of Apple's profits in the form of dividends, and you can vote on big company decisions, like who should be on the board of directors. But like I just said, Jagex is a private company, so for people like you and me, none of this is possible. For now. A few months back in August of 2021, a pretty important article about Jagex released that sort of flew under everyone's radar. It was titled, "London Float Mold for RuneScape Developer." No wonder it flew under the radar. What does that even mean? So, Jagex at the moment is owned by the Carlyle Group, a US private equity firm that manages over $293 billion worth of assets. To keep it simple, the Carlyle Group is known for buying undervalued private companies and creating value. Oftentimes after doing so, they'll either list the company on a stock exchange or sell it off to somebody else. I made this example when the Carlyle Group bought Jagex, but take a look at Supreme. The Carlyle Group bought a 50% stake in the clothing brand back in 2017 for $500 million, and in 2020, Supreme got sold for $2.1 billion, making Carlyle's stake into a cool billion. Unfortunately, since they sold their stake, that does mean we'll never get a RuneScape Supreme collab. Maxed Infernal Cape? Nah, that's not a flex. Take a look at this drip. That was so cringe to say. So, going back to Jagex, Carlyle purchased them, added value, and is now on to the third phase of their plan, listing the company on the London Stock Exchange. The process of doing this is called an initial public offering, or for short, an IPO. But since this article's release over 8 months ago, we've heard nothing about the IPO. They take a long time to come to fruition, but the complete radio silence seems a bit odd. However, Jagex's decisions the last few months provide more than enough of an explanation. Keep in mind, we're now entering theoretical territory. I don't work for Jagex, so I can't confirm everything I'm about to discuss is true, but I did discuss all of this with someone who is knowledgeable about Jagex's inner workings. In the last few months, some of Jagex's most important leadership positions have been vacated. Whether they were fired or willingly left the company, we don't know, but it all seemed to happen around the same time. First, in September, the vice president of Jagex exited the company. Then, in October, Mod Warden and Mod Bonsai left Jagex. Both were basically the leaders for, respectively, RuneScape 3 and Old School. The vision and strategy, development, player relations, everything went through these guys. In January of this year, the senior vice president of game development also moved on. These are some pretty important positions, and the people who filled them all worked at Jagex for 2 to 3 years. My informant told me that they were 4 of the 10 most important people at Jagex. It could just be a coincidence, but IPOs bring along a number of big changes, one of which is often company-wide restructurings. Now, originally, it was theorized Jagex would IPO on the London Stock Exchange in the first quarter of 2022, but seeing as how the first quarter ended 2 weeks ago, that obviously didn't happen. Before we talk about what went wrong, you might be wondering, what evidence is there that Jagex was going to IPO in that first quarter anyway? Well, if a company is going to IPO in the first quarter of a new year, the financials from the previous quarter are going to be the most important. Just like how you pressing the like button on this video is important to me. Anyway, the previous quarter's numbers are what most potential investors are going to look at before investing. So Jagex wanted to pack that quarter with as much as they could. Group Iron Man mode was one of Old School's most hyped updates, and despite a number of delays, during last year's Summer Summit, it got a new release date, which was early to mid-fall. The League's 3 game mode was also announced and was planned to launch sometime at the end of 2021. 2 months after the summit, Nex, the first new PvM boss in nearly 2 years, was announced, and although it had no specific release date, was said to launch soon. The fourth quarter was set to be jam-packed with long-awaited updates after about a year of sort of meh content, and there was no real reasoning for this ever given. When asked about it, JMods more or less said, hey, we didn't mean for this to happen, but it is what it is, and that they wanted to do all of this so they could, quote, start 2022 with a clean slate. Group Iron Man launched the first week of the fourth quarter, which landed right on time in the middle of fall. After lots of delays, things were looking up, and Jagex was on track to release all the previously discussed updates right on schedule. But then, something changed. 2 weeks before Leagues 3 launched, Jagex said, we think there's not enough time between Group Iron Man mode and Leagues 3. Since they're both unique new ways of playing the game, we want to give you time to experience both. So we're pushing Leagues 3 from November 2021 to January 19th, 2022. What makes this even more unusual is that Jagex said they wanted to push it to January rather than later in the year to allow players to spend their holiday season with their families and friends. Sure, that's what everyone's gonna do since there's no leagues anymore. They're definitely not gonna just sit in their room hiding from family and play the main game. Anyway, the previous 2 leagues ran right through all of December, so why would this be a problem now? Players took to Reddit and Twitter and complained that this wasn't what they wanted. Not everyone who plays RuneScape would be playing Group Iron Man, and they wanted leagues now, not in 2 months. To make it even worse, because the change was announced 2 weeks before Leagues was supposed to launch, many players had already requested days off from work to play, some of which they couldn't cancel. The post announcing the change was downvoted to 0, there were crab emojis everywhere, riots in the streets, and Jagex still didn't budge. As for Nex, like I said earlier, Jagex didn't give a specific 2021 release date, but her release was pushed to January 5th of 2022. You might just think they needed more development time, but Nex was actually added to the game on December 16th. She just couldn't be reached or fought. Nex was also a backport from RuneScape 3, meaning that the majority of the code for the boss was already done for them. ModReach, one of the developers of Old School's Corporeal Beast, said that Corp was also a backport from RuneScape 3. Graphical changes and the mapping of Corp's layer aside, Corp took less than an hour to code and get working from start to finish, and that was back in 2014. Now Nex is a much more complicated boss than Corp, but they had a working version of her ready to playtest back in September when they originally announced her. So why push both of these updates to the first quarter of 2022 when the pushback was so large against one and the other was already complete? Well, for reasons nobody really knows, it's believed the IPO was instead pushed to the second quarter of 2022. Instead of packing the fourth quarter of 2021 with content, they now needed quarter 1 of 2022 to look appealing to investors. But because they previously said 2022 would start off with a clear schedule, they now needed to push updates to the first quarter to fill it up. But like I said at the beginning, the Q1 IPO didn't end up happening either. Again, nobody knows why, but this time it might be factors outside of Jagex's control.
So far in 2022, the IPO pipeline has come to a near standstill.
The IPO market has essentially fallen off a cliff so far this year. This has been the worst 3-month stretch for IPOs in 24 quarters. Companies that can wait to go public are choosing to do so.
You probably already know this, but the world is insane right now. Not only do we have to deal with the virus, tack on the war in Ukraine, there's gas prices going up, rising interest rates, and so much more. Nobody wants to IPO right now. Uncertainty in the world's future is really high. Nothing is normal, and nobody knows when things will go back to normal. Will Jagex try to IPO this quarter? You might be catching on to the theme of this video by now, but nobody knows. But in the meantime, they're still doing things that make the studio look good to investors. For example, around 2 weeks ago, 30 Jagex employees were laid off, many of which were from the already struggling customer support department. That's right, the department that is responsible for responses to players like he and got cut down even more. But why? Likely to make the end of the quarter headcount look good and cut down on costs. As much as the players wish it wasn't the case, player support isn't necessarily essential to keep the game running. Then, on top of this, about a week ago, it was announced the price of membership is increasing from $11 a month to $12.50 a month for new and returning players. They even did the post announcing this on Wednesday, which is the day most game updates come out. So everyone was like, oh boy, what exciting content will we get this week? And Jagex just goes, nothing, give us more money. Or something along those lines, maybe a little less dramatic. The news post cited the reasons for this increase as rising development costs, inflationary rises globally, and fluctuations between international currencies, which I'm sure is all true to an extent, but at the same time, back in January, Jagex reported that 2020 was the best year of revenue for RuneScape ever. Not just that, they hit 1.2 million current members, the most members they've ever had. A game originally created in 2001 with graphics no better than a PlayStation 2 game just had its best year ever over 2 decades later. That's just absolutely mind-blowing. Yet they're still raising membership costs? Again, I think this is just about making Jagex look good, especially because they also removed the ability to buy membership in a 3-month bundle. This was a sweet spot for a lot of players, as paying for 3 months in advance gave a decent discount, and not as much of a commitment as the 6 or 12-month package. Now players have to either pay full price at monthly intervals, or make a 6-month commitment to the game and get a discount. It's obvious Jagex isn't struggling for cash, so I think the only real reason they'd upset players like this was to get ready for the IPO. So let's talk about what it'll be like if they actually do IPO. Unlike other times Jagex has been purchased, this one is a bit different. The new owners will be you, me, and probably a couple investment firms. However, Carlyle will still likely retain majority ownership of the company. If they just wanted to cash out, it would be easier to just sell Jagex rather than go through the rather difficult and lengthy IPO process. Now, this means a rich RuneScape fan like Soulja Boy can't buy up all the available Jagex shares and take over. Well, he's too busy with whatever random scheme he's decided to sell now anyway. But we could see less drastic changes. Most of these big investment firms are focused mainly on earning a profit for their customers, so maybe we'll see some more pressure on increased monetization in the game, but more likely on the RS3 side. I think by now it's been pretty well documented that Old School's player base is completely against any form of microtransactions, besides bonds I guess, and should any other kind ever get added, Jagex also knows Reddit has the power to take their grievances to the front page of the internet. So I don't think we have to worry about that, but only time will tell what Jagex decides to do. Jagex is well known for not always making the best decisions. They knew their biggest skill ever was broken, but launched it anyway. Check out my video about that on the right, or watch a video from my second channel on the left.